That night, sleep was impossible. My mind raced with thoughts of what I'd seen in the mausoleum, the figure, the lantern, the chilling screech. I couldn't shake the image of those hollow eyes, staring into mine with that unholy hunger. Every shadow in the cabin seemed to stretch toward me, and I couldn't stop the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. I had made a grave mistake, one that I couldn't undo. I had broken the rule, and now the consequences were taking hold. The whispers had followed me. Even after I left the mausoleum, I could hear them now, just beyond the walls of the cabin, barely audible, but unmistakable. "Come back," they whispered, in voices that sounded too close, too familiar. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood up from the bed, my limbs stiff from the tension that had settled deep inside me. I tried to ignore the voices, telling myself they were just my mind playing tricks on me, but deep down, I knew they weren't. The next day, I forced myself to go back to the graveyard. I had to. There was no avoiding it. I was the caretaker now. I had a job to do. The graveyard was silent when I arrived, just as it had always been. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, thin shadows across the graves. It almost looked peaceful, if it weren't for the dread that weighed heavily on me, suffocating me with every step. I walked the same paths, but everything felt different. The air was heavier, thicker. It felt as if the earth itself was holding its breath. I couldn't shake the sensation that the graveyard was alive, watching, waiting. The stones, worn and cracked from years of weather, seemed to shift in the corners of my vision, like they were moving when I wasn't looking at them directly. Every step I took felt like an echo in the stillness. The silence was suffocating. I glanced at the mausoleum from across the yard, and I could swear it was darker than before, as if something inside was stirring. My gaze lingered for just a moment longer than I intended, and then I saw it. A figure standing just beyond the entrance of the mausoleum, barely visible in the shadows. Its outline was vague, almost ethereal, but the shape was unmistakable. It was tall, thin and hunched over, like a distorted reflection of a human. I didn't need to see more to know it was the same figure I had encountered the night before. I froze, my body going stiff. The air around me felt colder, and I could see my breath, even though the sun was still high in the sky. I couldn't move. My feet felt like they were stuck to the ground, as if the earth was holding me in place. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, staring at me with those hollow eyes, its grin growing wider, more sinister. The whispers started again, but this time they were louder, sharper. They weren't just in the air anymore. They were in my head, urging me to come closer. "Come back," they said, over and over. "We're waiting for you." I snapped out of my trance and ran in the opposite direction. My feet carried me without thought, my heart pounding in my chest as I stumbled over the uneven ground. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. I knew if I did, I'd see it. The figure. The thing that had been waiting for me all along. I reached the caretaker's cabin, my chest heaving with panic. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it. But the whispers didn't stop. They followed me, creeping into my mind, filling my thoughts with their cold, twisted promises. "Come back." That night I tried to sleep, but every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind made my heart race. The figure, the mausoleum, the rule I had broken, they were all closing in on me, suffocating me with their presence. I couldn't escape. The more I tried to ignore it, the more it consumed me. I dreamed of the mausoleum. In my dream, the door was wide open, and the figure was standing inside, beckoning me to come closer. I could hear its voice, low, mocking, as if it knew everything I feared. "You shouldn't have come. Now you belong to us." I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was pitch black, and the only sound was the faint wind rattling the window. But I felt it. Something was wrong. I could feel the presence again, lurking in the corners of the room, watching me. I jumped out of bed, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. I ran to the window and threw it open, hoping to escape the suffocating feeling. The night air was cold, biting, and I could hear the wind howling in the distance. But something else was there. Something I hadn't expected. A figure was standing just outside the cabin, barely visible in the dark. I could see the outline of it, standing motionless in the shadows, its form almost blending in with the night. My heart stopped. I knew what it was. The same figure from the mausoleum. I backed away from the window, my body shaking uncontrollably. The whispers began again, this time louder, more insistent. "Come back," they hissed. "It's time." I could feel the ground beneath me tremble, as if the earth itself was calling to me. The rule I had broken, it wasn't just a warning, it was a curse. And now, I was bound to it. Something was coming for me. Something that wouldn't let me leave, no matter how hard I tried.
I couldn't ignore it anymore. The whispers, the figure, the ever-present sense of dread that clung to me like a second skin. I needed to understand what was happening in that graveyard. I had broken the rule, yes, but why had that been so dangerous? What exactly had I unleashed when I stepped inside the mausoleum? It was time to learn the truth. The next morning, after the longest night of my life, I decided to find out everything I could about the mausoleum and the strange forces that seemed to haunt it. I made my way to the town library, hoping to dig through old records or town history books that might give me some clue about what was going on. The place was quiet, as always. The library was small, filled with dusty old books, and smelled like paper and mothballs. No one was there except for an elderly woman behind the counter, who barely acknowledged my presence. I found an old, leather-bound history book tucked away on one of the shelves. It was thick with yellowed pages, covered in layers of dust. As I flipped through it, I found a chapter dedicated to the town's early settlers. And right there, in the margins of an old map, was a note about the graveyard, the same graveyard where I worked. The note mentioned a family whose name had been erased from history. It wasn't unusual for families to fade into obscurity, but this one had left behind a legacy of horror. The page described the founding of the town, and it said that one of the first families to settle here had been the Allens, a name that sounded vaguely familiar to me. I read on, my eyes widening as I uncovered the story of their descent into madness. The Allens had built their mausoleum over 100 years ago, but it wasn't just a final resting place. According to the book, they had made a pact with a dark force, one that had granted them wealth and power in exchange for something more sinister. The story was vague, but it mentioned that the family's patriarch had once been a man of great influence, and he had convinced the townsfolk that his family's crypt was a place of great significance, a place where the dead could be kept in eternal rest. The truth, however, was far darker. As I read on, I came across a passage that gave me chills. It described the family's decline, their strange behavior, and rumors that the mausoleum had been sealed because of the unnatural forces they had tampered with. The family had disappeared shortly after the mausoleum's completion, leaving only whispers of what they had done to attract such a curse. The book mentioned that the townsfolk had sealed the crypt, locking it with a powerful ancient ritual to ensure the dead never rose again. And they warned anyone who came near it that the dead would never truly rest if disturbed. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. The whispers, the figure, the rule that I had broken, it was all connected. The family had made a deal with something dark, something ancient, And the mausoleum wasn't just a tomb. It was a prison, holding back whatever evil the Allens had unleashed. I slammed the book shut, my heart pounding. I needed to know more, but the library had already begun to close. I gathered the book and checked it out, feeling like something was closing in on me. As I left, I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the figure from the mausoleum standing behind me. But there was nothing, only the oppressive silence of the town. Back at the graveyard, I walked with a new sense of urgency. I had learned the truth, but it felt like it wasn't enough. The curse had been set in motion long before I arrived. The Allens' pact had opened a door that could never be closed. And now, because I had broken the rule, the dead were waking. I made my way to the mausoleum once more, my heart pounding in my chest. The whispers were louder now, almost deafening, but I couldn't turn back. I needed to understand what had happened. I needed to know what I had unleashed. When I arrived, I found the door was still slightly ajar, just like the night before. But this time, I didn't hesitate. I pushed the door open, my fingers trembling. The mausoleum was just as dark and oppressive as before, but there was something different now. The air felt, it was as if the darkness was closing in around me. I stepped inside, the sound of my boots echoing off the stone floor. The lantern I had carried before was still glowing faintly, its light flickering like a dying flame. The temperature dropped again, and I could see my breath rising in thin clouds of vapor. But I couldn't stop now. I had to keep going. I moved deeper into the mausoleum, my eyes scanning the walls. The carvings and symbols that lined the crypts were unlike anything I had ever seen. They pulsed with a faint glow, as if they were alive, responding to my presence. The whispers were louder now, and I could hear them distinctly. "Come back. You've disturbed us." I froze, my blood running cold. This wasn't just a warning anymore. This was a threat. And then I saw it. The crypt that had been sealed for so long, the one that held the family's patriarch, the one that no one dared to open. It stood at the farthest end of the mausoleum, bathed in an eerie, otherworldly light. The carvings around it had changed, twisted symbols that were more like scars, as if the crypt had been opened recently. Something was moving inside. I stepped forward, unable to stop myself. The whispers were now more like a scream, filling my mind, urging me to leave. But I didn't. I couldn't.